Hi, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Christina, and I am an astrologer, and you are watching the Zenith Glow Astrology YouTube channel. Thanks so much for being here. I'm happy to have you. In today's video, we are going to talk about the upcoming transit of Jupiter in Cancer. And yeah, I've uncovered a lot about this transit and I'm really excited to talk about it. Before I get into it, I just want to let you all know I'm running a special through the month of June. If you book an appointment with me during the month of June and you use the code June25, you can get 25% off of your appointment price. So again, June 25, 25% off, pretty easy to remember. I'll also post that in the description below for those of you who are interested. Thanks so much for listening to my little spiel. All right, Jupiter in Cancer. This is a really fun one for me. Jupiter is one of my ruling planets, so I have a special affinity for Jupiter. So yes, Jupiter changes signs pretty much once per year, and it takes Jupiter about 12 years to go through the entire zodiac. This year, Jupiter is changing signs from Gemini to Cancer, and that's happening on June 9th, which is really interesting because June 9th, 6-9, that's actually the symbol for Cancer if you turn it horizontal. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of cool. So if you have Jupiter in Cancer in your natal chart, that means that you are experiencing a Jupiter return this year, which is pretty cool too. So Jupiter is considered to be exalted in the sign of Cancer. And that basically means that it is an auspicious placement, that Jupiter does really well in the sign of Cancer. And Hellenistic astrologers believed that that is because Jupiter and the moon kind of vibe with each other really well. They understand each other really well, which maybe upon first glance isn't super obvious, right? Because let's start with what we know about Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter is the greater benefic. It is the expander and the magnifier. So wherever Jupiter transits, we tend to experience good luck, abundance, opportunity, prosperity, all the good stuff that we want to hear when we sit down for an astrology reading, right? But Jupiter essentially expands or highlights or magnifies whatever it touches, okay? It's literally like the biggest planet in our solar system. I almost said in our zodiac. I guess that's true too. And so it has this energy of expansion, right? And it's also a gaseous planet. It's very large, but it's very light. And that's also kind of the energy of Jupiter. It's very light-hearted. It's the ruler of Sagittarius, the traditional ruler of Neptune. And that traditional rulership of Neptune has something to do with Jupiter's affinity for the moon, which is the ruler of Cancer. But Jupiter is very much like I talked about in my recent article about Saturn moving into Aries over on my Substack page. If you want to check that out, I'll post a link to that below. Jupiter is sort of like our fun teacher. Saturn is the strict teacher, the Severus Snape of the teacher world. And Jupiter is the teacher who everyone loves. Everyone enjoys learning from Jupiter because it's super fun. Jupiter has that kind of energy. It brings this lightheartedness, this spiritedness, this optimism, this enthusiasm to whatever it touches. Okay. Now, that's not to say it doesn't have a shadow side, because everything in astrology, if you know me, you know everything in astrology, from the planets to the signs to the houses, has positive and negative expressions. And it's up to the consciousness of the individual that determines what is expressed. Okay. So, Jupiter can lend itself to overextension, like making promises that it can't keep. It can actually be a little bit hedonistic. It can defer into laziness, and it can be a little bit superimposing, like a little too much. That's why it's interesting that it's exalted in the sign of Cancer, because a lot of the water signs are not too fond of the fire signs, right? And Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign, Cancer is a water sign. And the reason for that is because fire signs tend to be very boisterous. They tend to be loud and they have a very strong presence, and they're just kind of like all over the place, very action oriented, right? Especially Sagittarius. Um, and water signs are a little bit more quiet, a little more reticent, a little more withdrawn, a little bit more chill. So that fiery energy kind of boils water, right? And water doesn't really like that. And likewise, water kind of puts out fire. So fire doesn't always like water, right? But these two energies, Jupiter and Cancer, actually do go very well together. And again, we can kind of see that when we look at Jupiter's traditional rulership of the sign of Pisces. Because Jupiter relates to philosophy, right? It's the Sagittarius is the ruler of the ninth house. So Jupiter is very much concerned with higher truth and with wisdom. And it is the opposite of Mercury, right? Mercury is the ruler of Gemini and Virgo. And that's one of the reasons why Jupiter's been kind of uncomfortable in the sign of Gemini this past year, because it's very different from the way that Mercury functions. Mercury is all about details, data, analysis, what I can observe right in front of me, what can I prove with evidence is true. What can I corroborate on a very tangible level to prove that it's true? And Jupiter is all about looking at the big picture and kind of having a more holistic perspective. And it's all about wisdom that is cultivated through intuition. Okay. So for folks who have strong Sagittarius energy, strong Jupiter energy, they might have this mechanism that works within them wherein they know a lot of things, but they don't know how they know a lot of things. They understand truth, they have an idea of the order of the universe or spiritual laws or just conception of greater cosmological reality, but they don't exactly know how they know that. They just feel it, they just know it, it just comes to them. That's the intuition, right? And we can see this through Jupiter's traditional rulership of Pisces as well, because Pisces is a super spiritual sign. It's super feeling, right? Like it's a water sign. So it's very connected to emotions. It has very strong compassion and empathy. So, as the traditional ruler of Pisces, Jupiter shares some of those qualities as well, right? It's not completely foreign to the nature of Pisces, which means that it's not completely foreign to the nature of water. So, getting back to Cancer, Cancer is this sign that is all about emotions. And not just because it's a water sign, but because it is there to experience reality through emotions. That is the archetype of Cancer. It is there to cultivate sensitivity, to feel into its sensitivity, to grasp reality. We have signs like Gemini that are there to study reality and learn about reality through the mind, right? Through the analytical, logical mind. Cancer's job is to do the same thing, but to do it through the heart, to do it through feelings and emotion, okay? So Cancer is necessarily very sensitive as a result of that, okay? It needs to be super sensitive because if it's not going to be picking up on all the emotional vibes that give it this understanding of reality. So we're talking about arriving at conclusions, arriving at truths about the nature of reality, about human beings, about relationships, about existence, and it's coming through the feeling nature. Okay, this is very similar to the way intuition operates, okay? Because intuition isn't necessarily with the logical mind, it happens through this instinctual feeling nature, right? So, I want to point out that in Hellenistic astrology, not only did they say that Jupiter was exalted in Cancer, which, by the way, guys, we call that essential dignities in astrology when we say, oh, this planet is in its fall in this sign, or this planet is in its exaltation in this sign. Those are called essential dignities, and they're derived from Hellenistic astrology. Okay. So it was thought to be an auspicious placement, right? When a sign is exalted. It's literally what it says. Like, it's to raise up, to be brought into the light, to be shining brightly, to be in its most auspicious expression. Okay. So, also in Hellenistic astrology, they talked about how there were specific degrees that were particularly resonant of this exaltation. Okay. Meaning that this particular degree represents the energy, the vibe of this planet in this sign. And I think that's really interesting because for Jupiter, or excuse me, for Jupiter, well, yeah, for Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, Hellenistic astrology says that 15 degrees of Cancer represents the energy of Jupiter in Cancer. So if we look at the Sabian symbol for this degree, it's really interesting. So the Sabian symbol for 15 degrees of Cancer is a group of people who have overeaten and enjoyed it. And let me elaborate on that. The appropriate enjoyment of material abundance. Though it carries obvious risks of greedy attachments, the enjoyment of material abundance is a valid spiritual principle. It represents celebration of the self. Ooh. So in Sufism, it is taught that each plane of existence has its own special mystery. The mystery of the earth plane is abundance. Whereas the attachment to material wealth is counterproductive to the true seeker, it is the attachment that is the problem and not the abundance itself. Attachment to austerity is no better. It is known that all life is a reflection of our inner condition, and when we have reached a high spiritual station, we are able to experience material abundance if we choose to. That is the energy of 15 degrees of Cancer. And it's crazy because that's just 15 degrees of Cancer, right? Like any planet that's at 15 degrees of Cancer would hold that energy for this Sabian symbol. But it is particularly relevant to Jupiter in Cancer, right? Because Jupiter does pertain to abundance. And it does pertain to enjoyment. Jupiter, like I said, Jupiter can be a little hedonistic. Like, it likes to enjoy things, it likes to experience things, and to have that joy and enthusiasm and passion for life, right? And so, what I find really interesting about this, I've been doing all kinds of really nerdy research the last few days, and of course, it's come to me through synchronicity. I also want to mention before I get into this that so Jupiter will, it's going to go into the sign of Cancer on June 9th. It will be in the sign of Cancer until I think it's about June 30th, 2026. So, about a year it'll be there, a little bit more than a year. It's going to go retrograde this year on November 11th, 11/11. And then it will go direct again on March 10th, but the degree at which it is going to turn direct is at 15 degrees. And remember, I've taught you all before, when planets station, that is when they stop or they appear to stop as they are shifting direction, whether they're going retrograde or direct, we feel the energy of that planet most intensely. Okay, we feel that energy, especially when it's an outer planet, right? And Jupiter's technically a social planet, which means it's between the inner and the outer planets. But nonetheless, it has a very large presence. We feel that energy, okay? So, very just interesting, if you're someone who's a student of esotericism, you might be having your spidey senses prickling up right now as I talk about November 11th and 15 degrees and going direct and all these things, which is exactly what happened to me when I started looking up all this stuff. So, what I find really interesting about this, if we dive into the archetype of Cancer, no pun intended, we dive into the archetype of Cancer, Cancer's the ruler of the fourth house, right? And again, it's ruled by the moon. So the moon in and of itself is connected to intuition. It is connected to our feeling nature. So right there, we can see a little bit of this vibing that's going on between Jupiter and the moon. The moon also relates to our past. It relates to our past conditioning, particularly our emotional and psychological conditioning. And therefore, it can be connected to one or both parents. There's different theories about that in astrology. We won't get into that. Traditionally, mother, but there has been some uh, argument for it representing father in more recent years. I don't even want to say in more recent years. That's actually been around for many, many years. But the bottom line is it's our childhood conditioning, right? Whether that comes from mother or father or both or whatever, from the home environment. But it also ties into, especially with evolutionary astrology, past life conditioning, karma, like things that we bring into this life unconsciously, behaviors and things that are buried in the psyche that we're not aware of, that actually influence our behaviors and the types of experiences that we magnetize to us and what we experience in our day to day lives, right? That's a result of what we bring in from past lives. So, all this stuff is wrapped up in the moon. Cancer is, you know, the sign that is ruled by the moon. So it holds this energy as well. So it's part of the water trine when we look at the houses of astrology. Okay. So we have the fourth house, the eighth house, the 12th house are all the water houses in astrology. Every single water house is very complicated because the water signs tend to be more complicated than the others. It's just how it is. And that's because not only do they pertain to our emotions, they pertain to our psyche. They pertain to our unconscious self, right? The things that are going on below the surface of the water, right? The things that are below our conscious awareness that are influencing our emotional responses to things, all right? It is our psychological and emotional conditioning. And it is in the fourth house where we attain that that's not quite the right word, where we are accumulating some of that psychological emotional conditioning, right? Through our childhood experiences. Um, and then in the eighth house, we encounter it through our relationships. And then in the 12th house, it relates to the collective unconscious. All of the water houses, what they have in common is this idea that what is in our emotional realm, what is part of our psyche, what is part of our unconscious self, as long as it remains unconscious within us, it actually manifests in our physical reality as a reflection of our unconscious. Okay. So this can show up in a lot of different ways, but with Cancer in the fourth house, we are talking about our families, right? We're talking about our relationships with the people in our families. So, as children, that tends to be with our parents. And then as we grow up and we have our own children, it tends to be our relationship with our children. And again, there's this argument that there are no accidents, that what you experience in your life is the direct result of your karma, your past lives, your psychological conditioning. You are attracting experiences to you based on the material that's in your psyche, what is remaining below the surface, hidden in your unconscious self. Okay. And this will manifest in many different ways, but essentially, the idea of it is that whatever's below the surface, whatever we have not consciously brought up to our awareness, right, uh, is going to manifest on a physical level in our environment in some way, in our experience in some way. So, this is a really interesting idea because, again, Cancer also ties into our ancestry. It has a lot to do with tradition. Cancer and Capricorn both share this in common. Capricorn is the sign that's opposite of Cancer. They both relate a lot to tradition. So, on a more like generic level, we could say Jupiter transiting through the sign of Cancer means that there's going to be an expanded focus or a kind of magnetism drawing us to more traditional ways of thinking and being, particularly tied into ancestry and personal history, family history, maybe even cultural history. And we could say that we might be we'll see like a trend over the next year where people are kind of adopting more traditional family values or wanting to dig into their ancestry or their personal history, that kind of thing. That's all true, right? And we probably will see those things. And nothing wrong with that. Just saying, that's kind of a more general idea of what it means to have Jupiter in Cancer. But what I see happening and what I find really exciting is that as the ruler of the fourth house, we can look at Cancer as the seat of the soul, right? Sorry, guys, I just had something pop up on my computer. Let me close that. All right. It is the seat of the soul. It is the basis of our being. We have all of this conditioning, right, represented by the moon, that's accumulated, whether you don't believe in past lives, we can just say, well, that was early life conditioning. If you do believe in past lives, we can say, well, it's both, right? It comes from past lives and it comes from our early childhood, et cetera, et cetera. All of those really impressionable experiences that we have when we are children, right? And Cancer relates to children. It actually imprints on us on a psychic level, and it layers on to our being and influences how we behave in the world and what kind of adults we become as we grow up. We carry those experiences forward with us on an unconscious level. What's really cool about this is that does become a part of who we are, but it's not really who we are. If you want to go deep, if you want to get into the heart of the fourth house, the heart of the fourth house is your soul. It is who you truly are at the deepest level, apart from all of that conditioning, apart from those experiences that imprint on your psyche. Okay. And what is also really interesting, so we're kind of talking right now about the shadow self, right? Because we're talking about the unconscious self. The unconscious is vast, it is an ocean, right? It is huge. It is huge. What we contain within us, it's said that we remember every single little moment of every single day, of every aspect of our lives, right? It all gets stored in the unconscious self, in the unconscious mind. So it is vast. And when you dive into that, there's a lot to be found. And of course, this is where shadow work comes in. And yes, shadow work is part of it. And yes, while Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer, we may be doing some shadow work. We may be diving deep into our emotional conditioning, into our psychological selves to discover more about ourselves. Maybe we will feel inclined to study our family history or to look into our lineage to better understand ourselves. Those are all Cancerian types of themes. But what's really cool about this is the unconscious self is not just about the bad stuff. There's this idea that shadow work or the shadow is all bad stuff. Like, these are things about myself that I hate, and so I've repressed them, and I don't want to acknowledge them because they make me feel bad, and they're, these dimensions of my being that I'm ashamed of or I'm guilty of, or I store unconscious trauma because of this or whatever. Again, all of that is part of shadow work. But shadow work and the shadow and the unconscious within us also stores aspects of ourselves that are unacknowledged, period, good or bad, good or bad. So that means that within each of us, we have an eternal truth. We have a buried treasure deep within us that resonates with the truth and authenticity of our soul, of our heart, of our eternal essence, right? The seed of our being. And part of that essence is latent gifts and talents and abilities that we have not yet acknowledged within ourselves, that we have not yet discovered because we haven't dove into ourselves to discover the treasure, right? So that's why this is exciting, because Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter magnifies things, right? It's going to take those things that are deep within us and it's going to bring them up to the surface of our awareness. Jupiter is auspicious. Jupiter is, a beneficial planet. So, yes, if there are things we're ignoring and that need our attention, Jupiter will magnify them and it will draw our attention to those things. And sometimes that can come across as a negative experience because it's not very pleasant. But overall, Jupiter offers us opportunities to learn and grow and gain wisdom and to better ourselves. And while it is in the sign of Cancer, that self-betterment comes from self-discovery. And that self-discovery is going really deep into the core essence of who we are and discovering what is below the surface that we have not seen, that we have not shed light on within ourselves, that could be really awesome about ourselves that we have not yet recognized. What kind of gifts are you bringing in from past lives that you haven't yet connected with? Or what sort of latent talents have sort of been repressed and buried within you that you actually just were imprinted with when you came into this life? There's this idea of the acorn theory, okay? The acorn theory, which is a psychological thing. It's this idea that it's not so much about uh, nature versus nurture. It's not all about genetics, and it's not all about how you were reared by your parents, which again are kind of Cancerian themes. There's also this idea that apart from all of that, you came in as this acorn, right? The acorn holds the blueprint for the oak tree, all right? It doesn't become an oak tree because of, its the way that it fell from the tree and the place that it landed and this squirrel that picked it up and messed with it before dropping it again or whatever it is. It has this inherent blueprint to become an oak tree that is just a part of its essence, just who it is on its own. Okay. And I believe that that is true of all of us. Yes, we do attract certain nurturing experiences, right? And we do choose on some level the naturing experiences, our genetics and the families that we're born into and the experiences that we're going to have. But those experiences are all there not because they are making us who we are, but because they are helping us to remember who we already are, because they are helping us to draw out from within ourselves this core essence, this blueprint that we come into this life with, that we are meant to express. You could call this like destiny or soul's expression or life's mission, life's purpose, whatever it is. But your soul has this imprint, right? This unexpressed sense of being, this unexpressed purpose that it wants to experience, that it wants to move into full expression of as you go throughout your life, right? And you have all of these experiences through childhood, etc., that maybe they were tough experiences, maybe they were traumatic experiences, maybe you had a good childhood, whatever it is. But those things were all happening to actually coax out this blueprint in one way or another, okay, as it was written in part of your soul's plan. So Jupiter in Cancer is highlighting the blueprint for us. It is helping us get in touch with the inner acorn to find out, what is that blueprint? Who am I really at the deepest levels? What kind of unexpressed talents and abilities have I not yet made contact with? And yes, we can go in and study the ways that we are connected to our families, and we've been imprinted on psychologically, emotionally, and how that's shaped us, and all of these things, which are also really cool to explore in and of themselves. And then we can also get this better sense of how are the things that I have not yet acknowledged within myself actually shaping the manifestation of my reality unconsciously? Because on a psychic level, as it shows in all of the water houses of the chart, we do attract, we do manifest our reality based on what's in the unconscious mind. And once we acknowledge it, once we go into the unconscious and we shine a light on it and we see it, that's what we call integration with the conscious mind. Once we integrate that material with the conscious mind, we then have control, a degree of control over how that does or does not manifest. So if there's negative things that have been manifesting in our reality up until now as a result of what's latent in the unconscious mind, we have the ability to change that by making those things conscious. Okay. But on the flip side, maybe there are things that are calling from our soul to be expressed that we have not yet done so. And by shining a light on it and acknowledging it and recognizing it for what it is, we are given an opportunity, Jupiter, to be able to bring those things into conscious expression. And if those are things that our soul is calling for us to do, folks, that is called alignment. And when you are in alignment, that means that you are going to draw into your reality everything else that's in alignment. We're talking about prosperity, and we're talking about joy and fulfillment and a sense of purpose and a sense of being at home in yourself. Cancer, right? So Jupiter certainly is exalted in Cancer, and it will help us hone this intuitive faculty that we all have, right? It's going to marry together the wisdom of the mind with the knowing of the heart. And it's going to help us get into the deepest, most profound aspects of our being so that we can get in touch with our true essence. That is such a beautiful thing. I was so excited when I learned about this. And yeah, I couldn't wait to share it with you all because I think that it's going to be a really beautiful thing. Yes, there are some tricky aspects going on when we look at Saturn and Neptune. And yes, Saturn and Neptune are going to be squaring Jupiter in Cancer when it first moves into the early degrees of Cancer. So, there's going to be some tension in the month of June as well. It's not all going to be summer solstice, flowers, and sunshine. I do want to mention that we have a full moon just 2 days after Jupiter goes into Cancer on June 11th, and it's going to be a Sagittarius full moon. Jupiter's the ruler of Sagittarius, so this energy of Jupiter in Cancer is going to be influencing that full moon. And then we have a new moon. What day is that on? I don't even know what day that is. I'm sorry, folks. I will be doing videos on those, just so you know. New moon on June 25th, and that's going to be a new moon in Cancer. Jupiter's going to be conjunct that new moon. So there are some potential opportunities at hand this month with these energies. And then again, over the next year, we're going to have this energy. And again, going back to that Sabian symbol, which I don't know why I think it's kind of funny. A group of people who have overeaten and they like it. They enjoyed it. And again, it's this idea, celebration of self. And yes, I'm going to read that last part again. It is known that all life is a reflection of our inner condition. And when we have reached a high spiritual station, we are able to experience material abundance if we choose to. So again, it's this idea that when you get in touch with the unconscious self, you get to consciously choose what you want to experience in your reality. Okay? And I'm not saying that, we're not going to ever have negative things happen or that we have total control over everything that's going on in our lives, but I am saying that you do get to step into more of a magician type of role in your life where you get to choose what you want to manifest. You get to own your power. You get to hold greater confidence. But at the same time, there's this beautiful energy of compassion and empathy that comes through Cancer. And Jupiter is a benevolent planet. It is a planet that is seeking to do good for others in its highest expression. So think about what can be accomplished when you go into the heart, the truth, the seat of your soul of who you are, and you enter that space with this desire to help other people and this desire to take what is innate within you that is a beautiful blessing, a gift that you come into this life with. And how can I share that with other people to benefit other people? Beautiful vibes going on with this transit. Okay, so this has all been really serious. I wanted to share something else that's just kind of more lighthearted and funny, which is very Jupiterian, right? Jupiter's a jovial planet, and as ruler of Sagittarius, it has a really good sense of humor. So I was trying to think, what is a really good archetype that could express this energy of Jupiter in Cancer? And it was the middle of the night. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm sitting there because I got up to pee. I'm just going to tell you guys that. You don't need to know that, but that's what happens. I get up in the middle of the night to go pee, and I'm sitting in the in the dark, and I just start laughing. And if anyone was in my house, they would be like, "What is going on?" Because there's a laughter coming from the bathroom in the middle of the night. And it is because I got this image in my mind. And I thought of the perfect Jupiter Cancer archetype. Mrs. Doubtfire popped into my head in the middle of the night. And I realized at first I laughed at it because I thought, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Why did that pop into my head? And mind you, middle of the night, like I am not fully in control of my conscious faculty. Like there is definitely stuff coming up from my unconscious mind. And the next day I sat there thinking about it more and more, and I realized this is a really good archetype for Jupiter in Cancer. So if you've never seen Mrs. Doubtfire, go do yourself a favor and watch it because it's great. But as well, the reason why this archetype works with Jupiter in Cancer is because Robin Williams' character, right? He is this guy who's trying to make it as an actor, as a what do you call it? A voice actor, right? He's a comedian, of course. So he's got that Jupiterian quality, right? Where he's hilarious. He's funny. Kids love him. He's a big goofball. Everybody loves him for that, right? But he overextends himself and he makes promises that he can't really keep, or he's, destroying the house and he's driving his wife crazy, right? And so, of course, she wants to divorce him and things are sad for a while. He really just wants to be with his children because he loves his children. It's kind of a Cancer energy, right? So, what does he decide to do? He decides to pose as their housekeeper by cross dressing as this older English lady, Mrs. Doubtfire. So, what's interesting about this is it does kind of blend these energies because when he was on his own, and I'm so sorry, I can't remember his name. I think his name was Daniel, his character's name. Uh, Daniel is like, again, kind of the worst qualities of Jupiter. Like he's funny and the kids appreciate him, but he's not really responsible and he's kind of overextending himself and he's, his house is a mess and, it's just not working for him as a dad. When he begins to adopt these more Cancerian energies, these more maternal instincts, and he becomes more responsible and he starts to take care of the home and he starts to embody this maternal energy, suddenly the blending of those two things, Daniel, the Jupiter guy, and then Mrs. Doubtfire, the moon Cancer lady, it becomes like the perfect parent. And what's really interesting too is by the end of the movie, I don't think this really, if you haven't seen Mrs. Doubtfire, I'm sorry if I spoil it for you. It's been around since 1993, so you've had plenty of time to watch it. But by the end of the movie, what's interesting is he also finds his place in the world. He gets offered this amazing job to host a children's show as Mrs. Doubtfire. So he also finds his true essence in a way, which is hilarious because it's like Mrs. Doubtfire. But it is this idea. Okay, I'll stop that. It is this idea that when we go into ourselves at the deepest levels, apart from what has been imprinted on us from our environment, and we get in touch with this latent quality that exists within ourselves that maybe we didn't even know was there, we have the potential to step up into a version of ourselves that is actually uh, it's actually not only more true to the wholeness of who we are, but it can bring with it gifts, right? And we also end up giving more to the people around us, right? Everyone benefits. Like, I mean, not at first, of course, there's drama that happens in the story and all of that. There's conflict like all great stories have. But at the resolution of the story, Mrs. Doubtfire, he's a better father to his children. His wife is content. His ex-wife is content. He is content. Everyone's happy because he sort of gets in touch with this part of himself that he didn't even know was there. And it turns out that that part of himself was actually very talented and brought him auspicious opportunities and helped him to step into abundance in his life. He wasn't just like poor living in this crappy apartment, and you know what I mean? So again, it's not a perfect metaphor, but I thought, wow, thanks, unconscious mind. Thanks, unconscious mind, because you just gave me a great archetype to represent the energy of Jupiter in Cancer. So, Mrs. Doubtfire, if you want to get the energy of Jupiter in Cancer. Oh, let's see. Is there anything else that I forgot, guys? I do have some notes here that I took. Yeah, just this idea that, getting deeper into our feeling nature allows us to love deeper as well. It's this beautiful thing, right? Because again, all that imprinting, all that unconscious conditioning, those are things, those are patterns that we take on as a result of whatever reasons that can actually get in the way of us most authentically loving other people as well. And when we're talking about Cancer, we're talking about the ultimate divine feminine archetype, the mother, right? And in her highest expression, the mother is unconditionally loving. And it is this very nurturing energy. So, not only do we have an opportunity, Jupiter, to go deeper into ourselves, to nurture ourselves, the truth of who we are, our true essence, our heart, but from that place, once again, what's in your psyche is what's going to manifest in your reality. As you go deeper in yourself and you love yourself and you accept yourself and you become whole in yourself, you are able to love other people so much better. And you are able to give to them from this beautiful full cup within yourself. So, again, there's just some really beautiful energy. Sorry, I keep using that word. There's just really, really incredible opportunity with this transit for each of us to get in touch with our personal truth and to kind of spread some love, to spread some goodness. We've definitely had some tricky transits going on this year, and there's definitely some harsh energy out in the world in general. But this is something that is very much tied into the inner world. And again, we don't change the world by going out into the world and changing the world. We go inward into ourselves, and that manifests outwardly in the world as change. So, all right, folks. I hope that that makes sense. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. You're welcome here anytime. Thanks for checking out my video. Once again, I'm running that special through the month of June. If you want to book an appointment with me, you can get 25% off if you use the code June25. All right. Thank you so much. I will catch you all on the flip side. Take care. Love you all. Bye.